Springfield, Illinois, October 14, 2003. The autumn wind swept through the quiet streets of Springfield's west side, carrying with it the scent of burning leaves and the promise of an early winter. Detective Sarah Chen stood on the front lawn of 2847 Maple Avenue, watching as uniformed officers combed through the neighbors' hedges with flashlights, their beams cutting through the gathering dusk like desperate fingers reaching into the void. Inside the modest two-story colonial house, Linda Sanders sat on the edge of her worn floral couch, her hands trembling as they clutched a framed photograph of her son, Mark Sanders, 10 years old, with sandy brown hair that never stayed combed and a gap-toothed smile that could light up a room. The photo had been taken just 3 weeks ago at his school's fall festival. He was wearing his favorite Chicago Bulls jersey, the one he'd begged for all summer. "Mrs. Sanders," Detective Chen said gently, settling into the armchair across from her. "I need you to walk me through this morning one more time. Every detail, no matter how small." Linda's eyes were red-rimmed, her voice barely above a whisper. It was just a normal Tuesday. Mark had breakfast, cereal, frosted flakes. He always wanted frosted flakes. He was watching cartoons before school. SpongeBob, I think. She paused, her breath hitching. "I was running late for my shift at the hospital. I'm a nurse at Memorial. I told him to finish getting ready, that the bus would be here in 20 minutes. And you left at what time?" 7:15. "I always leave at 7:15. Linda's voice cracked. "I kissed him on the head. I told him I loved him. I told him to have a good day at school." Detective Chen made notes in her leather-bound notebook, the scratch of pen on paper the only sound in the suddenly oppressive silence. Through the window she could see Mark's father, Robert Sanders, speaking with Officer Martinez near the driveway. Robert was a mechanic at Jensen's auto shop downtown, a big man with calloused hands and shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of the world. His face was pale, drawn with a terror that Chen had seen too many times in her 12 years on the force. "The school called you at what time?" Chen continued. 9:43. Linda's hands tightened around the photograph. "The secretary, Mrs. Pemberton, she said Mark hadn't shown up for homeroom. She asked if he was sick. I didn't understand at first. I told her he should be there, that I'd sent him to school. That's when Her voice dissolved into a sob. Chen reached across and placed a hand on Linda's knee. "You called 911 at 9:56. You did everything right, Mrs. Sanders," you responded immediately. Robert Sanders entered the house, the screen door slamming behind him with a sound like a gunshot. "Anything?" he asked, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting Mark's name through the neighborhood. Chen shook her head. "We're organizing a wider search. The entire block is being canvassed. We've got officers checking every garage, every shed, every possible place he could be." "What about the bus driver?" Robert demanded. "Did anyone check with the bus driver?" Officer Martinez spoke with her. "Mrs. Dolores Cunningham been driving Route 47 for 8 years. She says Mark never got on the bus this morning. She remembers specifically because Mark always sits in the third row behind her, always says good morning. She noticed when he wasn't there." The implications hung in the air like smoke. Mark had left the house, his backpack was gone, his shoes were missing from the rack by the door. But he had never made it to the bus stop at the corner of Maple and Henderson, just 200 yards away. Chen excused herself and stepped outside, pulling her jacket tighter against the chill. The neighborhood was alive with activity now. News vans had begun to arrive, their satellite dishes rising like mechanical flowers seeking the sun. Neighbors stood in clusters on their lawns, arms crossed, faces pinched with worry and suspicion. Sarah, it was her partner, Detective Marcus Webb, approaching with long strides from his unmarked sedan. Marcus was 20 years her senior, a veteran of the department with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "We've got something." They walked together toward the corner where Maple Avenue intersected with Henderson Street. A small crowd had gathered, other parents who had been walking their own children to the bus stop, a jogger, a woman walking her dog. "Mrs. Patricia Holloway," Marcus said, gesturing to a middle-aged woman in a purple tracksuit. "She was out jogging this morning, same route she does every day. She passed this corner at approximately 7:30. Patricia stepped forward, her face pale. "I saw a boy, I think it was Mark, I've seen him before, waiting for the bus. He was standing right here by the stop sign. But there was a car." Chen felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of car?" "Dark blue sedan. Maybe a Honda or a Toyota, I'm not good with cars." It was pulled up right alongside the curb. The driver's side window was down. "Could you see who was driving?" Patricia's eyes clouded with frustration. "Not clearly. I was on the other side of the street and I was moving. It was a man, I think. Or maybe a woman with short hair. I'm sorry, I just wasn't paying close attention. It didn't seem unusual at the time. I thought maybe it was a parent dropping off another kid. But you saw Mark approach the car? Marcus pressed. I saw the boy, who I think was Mark, standing near it. He had a backpack. A red backpack, I remember that. And then, she paused, closing her eyes as if trying to pull the memory into sharper focus. I turned onto Henderson and kept running. I didn't look back. I didn't think anything was wrong. Chen exchanged a glance with Marcus. A dark blue sedan. A man or a woman. A child who never made it home. By the time the sun set that evening, the Springfield Police Department had mobilized its entire detective division. An Amber Alert had been issued. Mark's photograph flashing across television screens throughout Illinois and neighboring states. The FBI had been contacted, their child abduction rapid deployment team already en route from Chicago. In the Sanders living room, the family had grown. Linda's sister, Jennifer, had driven up from Champaign. Robert's brother, David, had taken emergency leave from his job in Peoria. They sat together in silence, the television playing news coverage on mute, Mark's face staring out at them from the screen. Detective Chen stood in Mark's bedroom on the second floor, taking in the details. Posters of basketball players on the walls. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. A desk cluttered with homework assignments and comic books. A telescope by the window that Robert had given him for his 9th birthday. Everything frozen in time, waiting for a boy who might never return. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Need you at the station now. The Springfield Police Department was a sprawling brick building on East Monroe Street, its fluorescent lights harsh against the darkness. Chen found Marcus in the Situation Room, where a wall of monitors displayed maps, photographs, and data streams. We pulled traffic camera footage from the intersections, Marcus said, his face grave. Look at this. On the screen, grainy black and white footage showed Maple Avenue at 7:32 a.m. A dark sedan, blue, just as Patricia Holloway had described, passed through the intersection heading east. The image quality was poor, the angle not ideal, but Chen could make out enough. Can we get the plates? She asked. Techs are working on enhancement, but it's not promising. The resolution is just too low. Marcus paused. There's more. We checked every dark blue sedan registered in Sangamon County. There are over 300. We're cross-referencing with sex offender registries. Prior child-related offenses, anything that might give us a lead. What about witnesses? Anyone else see anything? Door-to-door is ongoing. Most people were at work or getting their own kids ready for school. We've got one more potential. A man named Gerald Hoffman lives 3 houses down from the Sanders family. He was leaving for work around 7:20. Says he might have seen Mark walking toward the corner, but he's not certain. Chen felt the familiar frustration building in her chest. In cases like this, time was everything. Every hour that passed reduced the chances of finding Mark alive. Statistics were brutal, unforgiving. Most abducted children who are murdered are killed within the first 3 hours. It had already been 12 hours. We need to consider all possibilities, Chen said quietly. Family members, friends, anyone who had regular contact with Mark. Already on it, Marcus replied. Robert Sanders' alibi is solid. He was at the shop all morning, 3 witnesses confirm. Linda was at the hospital, dozens of staff can verify. We're looking at extended family, neighbors, teachers, coaches. Mark was on a youth basketball team. We're interviewing the coach and all the parents. The night stretched on. A relentless march of interviews, data analysis, and dead ends. By 3 a.m., Chen was back in her car, driving through the empty streets of Springfield, her mind racing with possibilities. Where was Mark Sanders? Who had taken him? And most terrifying of all, was he still alive? She pulled up outside the Sanders house one more time. The lights were still on inside, casting warm yellow rectangles across the dark lawn. Through the window she could see silhouettes. Linda and Robert, still awake, still waiting. Detective Sarah Chen sat in her car watching and made a silent promise. She would find Mark Sanders. She would bring him home. She had no idea it would take 16 years. Springfield, Illinois, October 2003 to December 2005. The command center had been established in the basement of the Springfield Police Department, a windowless room that quickly became Detective Sarah Chen's second home. Corkboards lined every wall, covered with photographs, maps, timelines, and handwritten notes connected by red string like a spider's web of desperation. At the center of it all was Mark Sanders' school portrait, his gap-toothed smile a constant reminder of what they were fighting for. 3 weeks after Mark's disappearance, Chen stood before the assembled task force, a mix of local police, FBI agents, and volunteer coordinators. The room smelled of stale coffee and exhaustion. "We've conducted over 400 interviews," she reported, her voice steady despite the fatigue pulling at her bones. "We've cleared all immediate family members, extended relatives, teachers, coaches, and neighbors within a 2-mile radius. The dark blue sedan remains our primary lead, but traffic camera enhancement has been unsuccessful in identifying the plates." FBI Special Agent David Morrison, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for solving impossible cases, stepped forward. "The profile suggests we're looking for a male, likely between 30 and 50 years old, familiar with the neighborhood and Mark's routine. This wasn't random. The timing, the location, the approach. This was planned." Linda Sanders attended these briefings religiously, though Robert had stopped coming after the second week. He couldn't bear to hear the clinical dissection of his son's abduction, the statistics about recovery rates, the careful language that everyone used to avoid saying what they were all thinking. Mark was probably dead, but Linda refused to believe it. She had transformed their living room into a headquarters of her own, coordinating volunteer search parties, printing flyers, calling television stations, doing anything to keep Mark's face in the public consciousness. Her sister Jennifer had moved in to help, taking leave from her teaching position in Champaign. "We got another call on the tip line," Officer Martinez told Chen one gray November morning. "Woman in Decatur thinks she saw Mark at a gas station." Chen felt the familiar spike of hope, immediately tempered by experience. They had chased dozens of such leads. Sightings in shopping malls, airports, truck stops, all of which had led nowhere. "Get me the details." The drive to Decatur took 90 minutes. The gas station was a run-down Shell station off Interstate 72, the kind of place people stopped at only out of necessity. The manager, a heavy-set woman named Rhonda Pierce, was waiting for them in the cramped office that smelled of motor oil and cigarettes. "It was 3 days ago," Rhonda said, her fingers drumming nervously on the desk. "Around 4 in the afternoon. This man came in, paid for gas with cash. He had a boy with him, maybe 10 or 11 years old. The kid looked scared, kept his head down. Something about it just felt off, you know." "Can you describe the man?" Chen asked, her notebook already open. "White guy, maybe 45, 50. Hard to say. He was wearing a baseball cap, sunglasses. Average height, average build. Nothing that really stood out." "And the boy? What did he look like?" Rhonda pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, one of the thousands of flyers that had been distributed throughout central Illinois. Mark's face stared up at them. "When I saw this at the post office yesterday, I thought maybe it was him. The hair color seemed right, the age, but I couldn't be sure." Chen's heart sank. "Did you see what kind of car they were driving?" "Blue sedan, dark blue. I remember thinking the driver's side had a dent in the door." The description matched. Chen immediately called for the gas station's security footage, but Rhonda shook her head apologetically. "System's been broken for 2 months. Owner keeps saying he'll fix it, but..." She shrugged helplessly. They canvassed the area, showed Mark's photograph to every business within a 5-mile radius. No one else remembered seeing the man and boy. The lead evaporated like morning mist. By Christmas 2003, the case had begun to fade from the headlines. Other stories took precedence. A factory fire in Bloomington, a political scandal in Chicago, the endless cycle of news that moved on while the Sanders family remained frozen in their nightmare. Chen refused to let it go. She spent her days reviewing evidence, her nights reading case files of similar abductions. She studied the patterns, the MOs, the geographical clusters. She contacted police departments in neighboring states, comparing notes on unsolved child abductions. She was searching for a signature, a thread that would connect Mark's case to something, anything, that could give them a break. Marcus Webb found her in the command center at 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve, surrounded by files and photographs, her eyes bloodshot from staring at computer screens. "Sarah, you need to go home," he said gently. "You need to sleep." "There's something we're missing," she insisted, not looking up. "Some detail we overlooked. It's here, Marcus." "I know it's here. You've done everything humanly possible. We all have." He sat down across from her, his face lined with concern. "But at some point, we have to accept that some cases don't get solved. At least not immediately." "Don't say that." Her voice was sharp. "Don't you dare say that." "I'm not giving up," Marcus said quietly. "I'm just being realistic. We have other cases, Sarah. Other victims who need our help. The department is reassigning resources. As of next week, this becomes a cold case. Chen felt something break inside her chest. Linda Sanders calls me every day. Every single day she asks if there's news. What am I supposed to tell her, that we're giving up? That her son doesn't matter anymore? You tell her the truth, that we'll never stop looking. That this case will remain open. That if any new evidence emerges, we'll pursue it immediately. But Sarah, Marcus reached across and closed the file she was reading. You can't sacrifice your entire life for this. Mark wouldn't want that. His family wouldn't want that. The winter of 2004 was brutal. Record snowfall buried Springfield under blankets of white that seemed to Chen like a shroud covering the truth. She was reassigned to other cases, a string of armed robberies, a domestic violence homicide, a drug trafficking investigation. But Mark Sanders' face haunted her. She kept his file in her car, would pull it out during lunch breaks and review the evidence for the 1,000th time. The blue sedan, the timing, the location. Someone had known Mark's routine, had known exactly when and where to find him. But who? Chen began to focus on a theory that had been nagging at her for months. What if the abductor wasn't a stranger? What if it was someone Mark knew? Someone he would trust enough to approach? She revisited every interview, looking for inconsistencies, gaps, anything that might indicate deception. She expanded her search beyond the immediate neighborhood, looking at anyone who might have had even tangential contact with Mark: delivery drivers, utility workers, contractors who had done work on houses in the area. One name kept appearing in her notes: Thomas Wayne Brennan, a 42-year-old handyman who had done electrical work for several families on Maple Avenue over the previous year. Brennan had been interviewed early in the investigation and cleared. He had an alibi for the morning of Mark's disappearance, confirmed by his girlfriend at the time. But something about Brennan bothered Chen. She pulled his background check and found a detail that made her blood run cold. In 1998, Brennan had been questioned in connection with another child's disappearance in Joliet, Illinois. A 7-year-old girl named Emma Hughes had vanished from her front yard. The case remained unsolved, but Brennan had been working as a contractor in that neighborhood at the time. Chen brought her findings to Morrison, the FBI agent, who was still peripherally involved with the case. Together, they dug deeper into Brennan's history. They discovered a pattern. Brennan moved frequently, taking short-term contracting jobs in different towns throughout Illinois and Indiana. In 3 of those towns, children had gone missing within months of Brennan's arrival. None of the disappearances had been connected before. This could be it, Morrison said, his eyes bright with the thrill of a breakthrough. This could be our guy. They put Brennan under surveillance. For 6 weeks, Chen and a rotating team of officers watched his every move. Brennan lived in a rundown apartment in Sherman, just north of Springfield. He drove a white pickup truck, worked sporadically, spent most evenings at a bar called the Rusty Nail, and he drove a dark blue Honda Civic with a dent in the driver's side door. The warrant was executed on a rainy morning in April 2004. Chen was part of the team that breached Brennan's apartment, weapons drawn, hearts pounding with the possibility that they might find Mark inside. The apartment was filthy, cluttered with empty beer cans and takeout containers. They searched every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. They found nothing. No Mark. No evidence of any children. No photographs, no clothing, nothing. Brennan was brought in for questioning. He sat in the interrogation room with his arms crossed, a smirk on his weathered face. "You got nothing on me," he said. "I didn't take that kid. I didn't take any kids." "Then explain the pattern," Chen demanded, leaning across the table. "Explain why children disappear from neighborhoods where you've been working." "Coincidence," Brennan shrugged. "I work in a lot of places. Bad things happen everywhere. Doesn't mean I had anything to do with it." His alibi for October 14, 2003, held up under scrutiny. His girlfriend, now his ex, confirmed he had been with her that morning. Phone records supported her statement. Without physical evidence, without a witness, without a body, they had to let him go. Chen watched Brennan walk out of the police station, rage and frustration burning in her gut. "He did it," she told Marcus. "I know he did it." "Knowing isn't enough," Marcus replied sadly. "We need proof." The months bled into years. Linda Sanders aged a decade in what seemed like weeks, her face becoming gaunt, her eyes hollow. Robert threw himself into work, spending 16-hour days at the auto shop, anything to avoid the empty house that had once been filled with Mark's laughter. Their marriage, strained beyond breaking, ended in a quiet divorce in 2005. Robert moved to Bloomington. Linda stayed in Springfield, unable to leave the place where her son had last been seen. Chen visited her regularly, bringing updates even when there were none, maintaining the connection because she knew Linda needed it. They would sit in that same living room drinking coffee, looking at photographs, remembering Mark. He would be 12 now, Linda said one December afternoon, her voice distant. Starting middle school. Growing so fast I'd have to buy new clothes every few months. He wanted to play basketball in high school, did you know that? He was practicing his jump shot in the driveway every night before. I haven't forgotten him, Chen said firmly. I will never forget him, and I will never stop looking. Linda reached over and squeezed her hand. I know. You're the only one who hasn't given up. But as the command center was dismantled, as the cork boards were taken down and the files were boxed and moved to storage, Chen wondered if persistence alone would be enough. The trail had gone cold. The leads had dried up. Thomas Wayne Brennan had moved to Missouri, beyond their jurisdiction, beyond their reach. Mark Sanders had been swallowed by the darkness, and the darkness wasn't giving him back. Chen stood in the empty basement room one last time before it was reassigned for other purposes. Mark's school portrait was the last thing on the wall. She carefully removed it, held it in her hands, studied that gap-toothed smile. I'm sorry, she whispered to the photograph. I'm so sorry. She had no way of knowing that the answer was already out there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for technology to catch up to the truth. Springfield, Illinois, 2006 to 2015. Detective Sarah Chen was promoted to sergeant in 2008, a recognition of her decade of service to the Springfield Police Department. The promotion came with a larger office, more administrative responsibilities, and a nagging sense that she was moving further away from the work that mattered, solving cases like Mark Sanders. The file never left her desk, while other cold cases were relegated to storage, packed away in cardboard boxes gathering dust in the basement. Mark's case remained within arm's reach. Chen had long since memorized every detail, every witness statement, every dead-end lead, but she continued to review it regularly, hoping that fresh eyes, even her own, reading for the 100th time, might spot something new. Marcus Webb retired in 2010, his last day marked by a modest celebration in the break room. As he was leaving, carrying a box of personal items from his desk, he stopped by Chen's office. You're still looking at that file, he said, though it wasn't really a question. I can't let it go, Chen admitted. It's like a splinter under my skin. I know the answer is in here somewhere. Marcus set down his box and pulled up a chair, settling into it with the careful movements of a man whose joints had begun to betray him. I've been doing this job for 32 years, Sarah. I've worked hundreds of cases. Some of them still keep me up at night. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But you can't let one case consume your entire career, your entire life. This isn't just any case, Chen said quietly. That boy deserved better than to vanish into thin air. His mother deserves answers. Linda Sanders. Marcus nodded. How is she? Surviving, barely. Chen had visited Linda just the previous week. The house on Maple Avenue was showing its age. Peeling paint, overgrown lawn, gutters clogged with leaves. Inside was worse. Linda had transformed Mark's bedroom into a shrine, preserving everything exactly as it had been on October 14, 2003. The Bulls jersey still hung on the back of the door. The homework assignments still sat on the desk. The telescope still pointed toward the window, waiting for a boy who would never return to stargaze. Linda herself had become a shadow, her hair gone completely gray, her body thin from meals forgotten and grief that consumed more calories than food could replace. She worked part-time at Memorial Hospital, just enough to pay the bills, spending the rest of her hours maintaining websites dedicated to missing children, attending support groups, and waiting for a phone call that never came. She's never going to have closure, Marcus said. Not unless we find him or find out what happened to him. Then we keep looking. Marcus stood, picked up his box, and moved toward the door. He paused at the threshold. Do me a favor, Sarah. Don't let this case take everything from you. Don't end up like Linda, living in the past, waiting for something that might never come. But Chen couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. As the years passed and technology advanced, she pursued every new avenue that opened. When DNA databases expanded, she submitted the samples they had collected from Mark's bedroom, hair from his brush, saliva from a drinking glass, into every system available. When social media exploded across the cultural landscape, she created pages dedicated to Mark's case, reaching audiences that traditional media could no longer capture. She learned about new investigative techniques, attended conferences on cold case resolution, networked with detectives from across the country who were wrestling with their own impossible mysteries. She became something of an expert on long-term missing children cases, consulted on investigations from Ohio to Oregon. In 2012, she received a call from the FBI about a body discovered in a forest preserve near Bloomington. Male, approximate age would match Mark if he were still alive, buried in a shallow grave that had been exposed by erosion. Chen drove there immediately, her heart hammering with dread and dark hope. If it was Mark, at least they would have answers. At least Linda could bury her son. The remains were too degraded for visual identification. DNA testing took 6 weeks. Chen called Linda to prepare her, to warn her that this might be the end of the waiting, one way or another. "I don't know if I want it to be him or not," Linda confessed over the phone, her voice cracking. "If it's him, then he's gone forever. But if it's not him, then he's still out there somewhere, maybe suffering, maybe needing me. And I'm here doing nothing." The DNA results came back negative. The remains belonged to another missing child, a runaway from Chicago who had died from exposure 2 winters earlier. Another family received their terrible closure. Linda Sanders continued to wait. Thomas Wayne Brennan surfaced again in 2013. He had been arrested in Kansas City for assault, his mugshot appearing in a database that Chen monitored religiously. She immediately contacted the Kansas City Police Department, explained the history, requested they investigate whether Brennan might be connected to any local missing children cases. The Kansas City detectives were polite but dismissive. Brennan had been in a bar fight, nothing more. His apartment was searched as part of the assault investigation. Nothing suspicious was found. Without evidence, without jurisdiction, Chen could only watch from afar as Brennan was convicted on the assault charge, served 8 months, and disappeared back into the landscape of America's anonymous working class. "He's out there," Chen told her new partner, Detective Raymond Torres, a younger officer with sharp instincts and a respect for Chen's obsession with the Sanders case. "He took Mark. I know he did, but I can't prove it." Torres had reviewed the file at Chen's request, approaching it with the fresh perspective that Marcus had once suggested might reveal something new. "The problem is the alibi," he said. "Brennan's girlfriend puts him at home that morning. Unless she's lying, which we can't prove, we've got nothing placing him at the scene. Then we need to break the alibi, find some inconsistency, some reason she might have been mistaken or deliberately misleading us." But Angela Porter, Brennan's former girlfriend, had moved to Arizona in 2006 and wanted nothing to do with the investigation. When Torres finally tracked her down by phone, she was adamant. "I was with Tommy that morning. We had breakfast together. I remember because we were fighting about money, about his drinking. I know exactly where he was." The wall remained impenetrable. Chen attended a cold case conference in Washington, D.C. in November 2014, sitting through presentations on advanced forensic techniques, genetic genealogy, and the emerging science of using DNA databases to identify both victims and suspects through familial connections. The keynote speaker was Dr. Barbara Rae Venter, a genetic genealogist who had made headlines by using commercial DNA databases to identify the Golden State Killer after decades of mystery. "The future of cold case investigation isn't just about traditional police work," Dr. Rae Venter explained, her presentation showing complex family trees built from genetic markers. "It's about understanding that DNA is a map, and every person is connected to countless others through that map. If we can find the connections, we can find answers that seemed impossible just a few years ago." Chen sat in the darkened auditorium, transfixed. After the presentation, she approached Dr. Rae Venter during the networking reception. "I have a case," Chen began. "A missing child from 2003. We have his DNA profile from items in his bedroom, but he's never appeared in any database. What if—" She paused, organizing her thoughts. "What if he's alive? What if he's living under a different identity? Could genetic genealogy help us find him?" Dr. Rae Venter considered the question carefully. "It's possible, but difficult. If he's never submitted DNA to a commercial database, and why would he? If he doesn't know he's missing, then we'd need to find relatives who have. Parents, siblings, cousins. The more genetic connections we have, the better our chances of building a family tree that leads to him. His parents are still alive. His mother especially would do anything. Then that's your starting point. Get them tested. Upload their profiles to every commercial database that allows law enforcement access. GEDmatch, Family Tree DNA, 23andMe if they'll cooperate. Cast the widest net possible." Chen returned to Springfield energized with new purpose. She met with Linda Sanders in that same living room where they had shared so many cups of coffee over the years, where Mark's photograph still held its place of honor on the mantle. "There's a new technique," Chen explained. "It's how they caught the Golden State Killer, how they're solving cold cases that were thought to be unsolvable. It uses DNA and genetic genealogy." Linda's eyes, which had been dull with the exhaustion of years of disappointment, suddenly sparked with something that might have been hope. "What do you need me to do?" "A DNA sample, a simple cheek swab. We'll upload your genetic profile to commercial databases. If Mark is alive, if he's out there somewhere, and if he ever takes a DNA test for any reason, ancestry, health screening, anything, the database will flag the connection. You're his mother. The genetic match would be undeniable. And if he's—" Linda couldn't finish the sentence. "If he's not alive, the same technology could help us identify remains, could give us closure. Either way, it's a new path forward. It's something we haven't tried before." Linda agreed immediately. Chen also contacted Robert Sanders in Bloomington, explained the new strategy. Robert, who had remarried and started a new life, was hesitant. "I don't know if I can go through this again," he admitted. "Every time there's a lead, every time someone thinks they've seen him or found something, it rips open the wound all over again. It's been 12 years, Detective. Maybe it's time to accept that he's gone." "I understand," Chen said gently, "but your DNA could be the key. We need as many genetic connections as possible. You're his father. Your profile, combined with Linda's, would create a powerful search tool." After a long silence, Robert agreed. "For Linda. She deserves peace, one way or another." The DNA samples were collected, processed, and uploaded to multiple databases in early 2015. Chen created alerts, set up monitoring systems, checked the databases weekly for any new matches. Weeks became months. The databases grew as more people submitted their DNA for ancestry testing, the new hobby that had captured America's imagination, everyone wanting to know their ethnic percentages and find long-lost cousins. But no alerts triggered, no matches appeared. Mark Sanders remained lost. Chen refused to despair. She knew that genetic genealogy was a long game, that it might take years for the right connection to surface. Every day, thousands of new people uploaded their DNA. Every day, the net grew wider. The chances improved. She continued her regular visits with Linda, bringing updates even when there was nothing new to report, maintaining the human connection that had become as important as the professional investigation. They would sit together, two women bound by a missing boy, drinking coffee, and remembering. "He'd be 22 now," Linda said one autumn afternoon in 2015, her voice distant. "Done with college maybe, starting a career. Maybe he'd be married. I could be a grandmother." She smiled sadly. "I imagine him sometimes, what he might look like as an adult. Would he still have that gap in his teeth? Would he be tall like Robert? Would he still love basketball?" "We're going to find him," Chen said, not for the first time, hoping she wasn't making a promise she couldn't keep. "I know you believe that," Linda replied. "Your faith keeps me going, Detective. Some days it's the only thing that does." That winter was harsh again, as if Springfield's weather was locked in a cycle of brutality. Chen spent Christmas alone in her apartment, reviewing the Sanders file one more time, the glow of her computer screen the only light in the darkness. She had never married, had no children of her own, had devoted her life to seeking justice for others. Was Marcus right? Had this case consumed her? Had she sacrificed too much pursuing a ghost? Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Linda. "Merry Christmas, Detective. Thank you for never forgetting Mark. Thank you for never giving up. You're family to me now." Chen stared at the message, feeling tears prick her eyes for the first time in years. She typed a response. "Merry Christmas, Linda. We're going to bring him home, I promise." As she sent the message, somewhere in the vast digital infrastructure of genetic databases, algorithms were working, comparing millions of genetic markers, searching for connections that might exist between submitted profiles. The technology was patient, tireless, waiting for the moment when the right pieces would align. That moment was coming, but it would take 4 more years, and the answer would be nothing like anyone expected. Springfield, Illinois, January 2019. The notification came on a Tuesday morning, 16 years and 3 months after Mark Sanders had vanished from Maple Avenue. Detective Sergeant Sarah Chen was at her desk working through paperwork on a burglary case when her phone chimed with an alert she had almost forgotten she had set up. "Get match alert. New close match. Detected her coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. She set it down carefully, her hand suddenly trembling, and opened the email. The genetic genealogy database had flagged a new profile that showed a close familial match to Linda Sanders' DNA, the kind of match that indicated a parent-child relationship. Chen's heart hammered against her ribs. She clicked through to the detailed analysis, her eyes scanning the technical jargon and percentage markers. The match was definitive. The person who had submitted this DNA shared approximately 50% of their genetic markers with Linda Sanders. This was her son, or someone claiming to be. Chen immediately pulled up the profile information. The submission was anonymous, identified only by a username, TreeSeeker247. The person had uploaded their raw DNA data 3 days earlier, on January 19, 2019, apparently seeking information about their ancestry and biological relatives. The profile listed no personal information, no photographs, no identifying details beyond the genetic data itself, but GDmatch allowed users to contact matches through its internal messaging system. Chen's hands shook as she drafted a message. She had imagined this moment countless times over the years, had rehearsed what she would say, how she would approach it. But now that it was real, the words seemed inadequate, fragile things that could shatter everything if chosen poorly. She started typing, "Hello, my name is Detective Sergeant Sarah Chen with the Springfield Police Department in Illinois. Your DNA profile has been flagged as a match to an open missing persons case from 2003. I understand this message may be confusing or alarming, but I need to speak with you urgently regarding your biological family. This is not a joke or a scam. Please contact me at the following number as soon as possible." She included her direct line and her official email address, then hesitated before hitting send. What if this was a mistake? What if the match was somehow erroneous? What if she raised Linda's hopes only to crush them again? But the genetic evidence was clear. This was real. She sent the message. The next 72 hours were excruciating. Chen checked her email obsessively, her phone always within reach, jumping at every notification. She didn't tell Linda Sanders yet, couldn't bear to, not until she had more information, not until she was absolutely certain this wasn't another dead end. She pulled every string she had, contacted colleagues at the FBI, reached out to genetic genealogy experts for confirmation of the match. Dr. Barbara Ray Venter, whom Chen had consulted with after the conference in 2014, reviewed the data personally. "This is a parent-child match," Dr. Ray Venter confirmed over the phone. "The shared DNA percentages are definitive. This person is biologically related to Linda Sanders as her child. There's no question about it. Could it be another child? Someone she doesn't know about? You'd have to ask her that, but assuming she's only had one child, and that child went missing in 2003, then yes, this is almost certainly Mark Sanders, or rather, whoever he's become." Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Whoever he's become. What did that mean? What had happened to Mark Sanders in the 16 years since he had disappeared? On Friday afternoon, her phone rang. The number was blocked. "Detective Chen," she answered, her voice catching in her throat. There was a long pause on the other end, filled with the sound of breathing and distant traffic. Finally, a man's voice spoke, hesitant and confused. "I got your message. On GEDmatch. I don't understand what you're talking about. What missing persons case?" Chen's grip tightened on the phone. The voice was young, mid-20s, with a slight Midwestern accent. "Can you tell me your name?" Another pause. Ryan Mitchell. "I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I submitted my DNA because I was adopted and I wanted to learn about my biological family. But I don't know anything about Illinois or missing persons or any of that." Chen's mind raced. Adopted. Cedar Rapids. The pieces were starting to align into a picture that made her blood run cold. "Ryan, I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be patient with me because what I'm about to tell you is going to be very difficult to hear. You're scaring me. I know, and I'm sorry, but I need you to listen carefully." Chen took a deep breath. "Were you adopted as a child? And if so, do you know when and from where?" "Yeah, I was adopted. My adoptive parents, Dave and Susan Mitchell, they adopted me in 2004. I was about 11 years old. They told me I came from a difficult situation, that my biological parents couldn't take care of me, but they've never given me many details. They said it was a closed adoption, 1 year after Mark had disappeared." Chen felt her pulse racing. "Ryan, do you remember anything from before you were adopted? Anything about where you lived, who you were with?" The silence stretched so long that Chen thought the connection had dropped. Then Ryan spoke again, his voice smaller, younger. I don't remember much. It's like there's this fog over everything before the Mitchells. I remember being scared. I remember someone telling me my name was Ryan, that I had to forget my old name, that I was starting a new life. I remember moving a lot, living in different places, but the details are fuzzy like a dream I can't quite recall. Ryan, I need you to think very carefully. Do you remember the name Mark? Does that mean anything to you? Another long pause. Sometimes I have these dreams. There's a house with a woman who's crying. There's a basketball hoop in a driveway. There's a school bus that I'm supposed to get on, but I don't. And there's a voice calling a name over and over, but I can never quite hear what the name is. His voice cracked. What's happening? Who am I? Chen felt tears burning behind her eyes. 16 years. He had been alive this entire time, living under a different name, his memories suppressed or fragmented while his mother had waited and grieved. Ryan, I believe your real name is Mark Sanders. I believe you were abducted from Springfield, Illinois on October 14, 2003, when you were 10 years old. Your biological mother, Linda Sanders, has been looking for you ever since. The sound that came through the phone was somewhere between a sob and a gasp. That's impossible. My parents adopted me legally. They have paperwork, they're good people, they wouldn't. I'm not suggesting they did anything wrong, Chen said quickly, though her mind was already churning through the implications. But I need to investigate how you came to be adopted, where you came from, who facilitated the adoption. Can you tell me about Dave and Susan Mitchell? What do they do? How did they come to adopt you? Ryan's voice was shaking now. My dad works in insurance. My mom's a teacher. They're in their 60s now. They adopted me through an agency, I think. They said they wanted to give a home to a child who needed one. They've always been good to me, Detective. They're my parents. I understand, and I'm not trying to take that away from you. But Ryan, if you are Mark Sanders, and the DNA evidence strongly suggests you are, then there are people who need answers. Your biological mother never stopped looking for you. She deserves to know you're alive. And we need to understand what happened, how you ended up in Cedar Rapids with a different identity. I need to talk to my parents, Ryan said, his voice barely a whisper. I need to ask them about this. Ryan, wait. But the line had already gone dead. Chen immediately called the FBI, requesting assistance from their field office in Cedar Rapids. She explained the situation to Special Agent Julie Thornton, who had experience with recovered missing persons cases. This is delicate, Thornton warned. If the adoptive parents are innocent, if they truly believed this was a legitimate adoption, then we don't want to traumatize them unnecessarily. But if they knowingly participated in concealing a kidnapped child, then we're looking at serious federal charges. Either way, we need to move carefully. I need to tell Linda Sanders, Chen said. She's waited 16 years. She deserves to know. Not yet. Not until we've confirmed the identity and secured the situation. If this Ryan Mitchell really is Mark Sanders, and if there are people involved in his disappearance who might try to silence him or flee, we can't risk tipping them off. Chen understood the logic, but it felt like a betrayal. She had promised Linda they would find Mark. Now that they might have, she had to keep silent. The next 72 hours were a blur of coordination between law enforcement agencies. FBI agents in Cedar Rapids located Ryan Mitchell's address, established surveillance prepared for multiple scenarios. Meanwhile, Chen worked with prosecutors to draft warrants. To build the legal framework, they would need to investigate the adoption agency, the paperwork, everyone involved in Ryan's transformation from Mark Sanders to Ryan Mitchell. On Monday morning, Chen's phone rang again. It was Ryan. I talked to my parents, he said, his voice hollow. They told me everything. Chen put the call on speaker and gestured for Detective Torres to listen in. What did they tell you, Ryan? They said they adopted me through a private agency in 2004. The agency told them I was from a troubled home, that my parents were drug addicts who couldn't care for me, that the state had removed me and I needed a fresh start. They said they paid a lot of money, $40,000, to cover legal fees and processing. They said the agency assured them everything was legitimate, that all the paperwork was in order. Do you remember the name of the agency? New Horizons Family Services. It was based in Des Moines. Chen was already typing, searching databases. New Horizons Family Services had been shut down in 2007, its director arrested for fraud and illegal adoptions. The director had died in prison in 2012. The trail had gone cold years ago, but now it was heating up again. Ryan, The agency that facilitated your adoption was involved in illegal activities. They were shut down by federal authorities for fraudulent adoptions. Your parents may have been victims too, believing they were legitimately adopting a child in need. But I wasn't a child in need. I was stolen. Ryan's voice broke. Someone took me from my real family. Someone erased who I was. And my parents, Dave and Susan, they paid money to people who trafficked in kidnapped children. We don't know the full extent of their knowledge yet, Chen said carefully. That's what we need to investigate. But Ryan, I need to ask you something important. Do you remember anything about the day you disappeared? Anything about who took you? There was a long silence. Chen could hear Ryan breathing, could almost feel him reaching back through the fog of suppressed memories, trying to grasp something solid. There was a car, Ryan said finally, his voice distant. A blue car. Someone I knew, I think. They said they were taking me somewhere. They said my mom asked them to pick me up. I trusted them. I got in the car. His voice cracked. Oh God. I got in the car willingly. I wasn't dragged away. I went with them because I thought it was okay. Ryan, you were 10 years old. Nothing about this is your fault. Who was it? Ryan demanded, anger suddenly flooding his voice. Who took me? Who destroyed my life? Who made me forget my own mother? Chen hesitated. She had her suspicions. Thomas Wayne Brennan, the handyman who had worked in the neighborhood, whose pattern of movement had coincided with multiple disappearances. But suspicions weren't proof, and after 16 years the truth might be even more complicated than she had imagined. We're going to find out, Chen promised. But first, Ryan, we need you to come to Springfield. We need to confirm your identity officially, get more detailed DNA testing, conduct formal interviews, and... She paused, choosing her words carefully. There's someone who very much wants to meet you. My mother, Ryan whispered. Linda Sanders. My real mother. Yes, if you're ready, if you want to. Another long silence then. I'm scared. What if I don't remember her? What if she's disappointed? What if I'm not the son she's been waiting for? You're alive, Chen said softly. That's all she's ever wanted. Everything else you'll figure out together. That afternoon, Chen finally called Linda Sanders. Her hand trembled as she dialed the number she knew by heart. Linda, it's Detective Chen. I need you to sit down. I have news. Springfield, Illinois, February 2019. The Springfield Police Department's Victim Services conference room had been transformed for the occasion. Gone were the usual harsh fluorescent lights, replaced by softer lamps borrowed from various offices. Someone had brought in fresh flowers, tulips, bright yellow against the institutional beige walls. A box of tissues sat on the table, along with bottles of water and a tray of cookies that no one would touch. Detective Sergeant Sarah Chen stood by the window, watching the parking lot. Her stomach was twisted in knots, her palms damp despite the winter chill seeping through the glass. In her 16 years as a detective, she had never felt this nervous about a case development. Usually, reunions in missing persons cases were bittersweet at best. A body recovered, closure delivered with grief, but this was different. This was a miracle, fragile and terrifying in its impossibility. Linda Sanders sat in one of the cushioned chairs, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. She had aged another decade in the week since Chen had called her with the news. The shock, the disbelief, the desperate hope that this wasn't another cruel false lead. It had carved new lines into her face, hollowed her eyes further. What if he doesn't remember me? Linda whispered for the 10th time that hour. What if he looks at me and sees a stranger? Then you'll help him remember, Chen said gently, leaving her post by the window to sit beside Linda. The doctors say his memories are there, just buried. Seeing you, being in Springfield, it could help bring them back. Linda clutched a photograph in her hands, the same school portrait of Mark that had been on every missing poster, every news broadcast, every database for 16 years. That gap-toothed smile, those bright eyes, that tousled sandy hair. He's 26 now, a grown man. I've missed his entire childhood, his teenage years, everything. I don't even know who he is anymore. You're his mother. That hasn't changed. The door opened and FBI Special Agent Julie Thornton entered, her expression carefully neutral. They're here. Ryan, Mark, is with his adoptive parents. They insisted on coming with him. I've explained that this meeting is just for you and him, but they're understandably anxious. They've been his parents for 15 years. Linda's face tightened. They're not his parents. I'm his mother. They stole 15 years from me. We don't know what they knew. Chen reminded her gently. "The investigation is ongoing. Right now we need to focus on Mark." "Ryan," Linda corrected bitterly. "They even took his name from him." Chen had spent the past week interviewing Dave and Susan Mitchell, going through every document related to Ryan's adoption, tracking down everyone who had worked for New Horizons Family Services before its collapse. The picture that emerged was complicated, murky, full of plausible deniability and careful misdirection. Dave and Susan Mitchell were in their early 60s now, a quiet couple from Cedar Rapids who had desperately wanted children but couldn't have them biologically. They had adopted Ryan, as they knew him, in 2004, paying $40,000 to an agency that had promised them a child from a troubled background who needed a fresh start. The agency had provided documents, a birth certificate for Ryan Mitchell, born in Davenport, Iowa, to parents listed as deceased, medical records showing a history of neglect and trauma, court orders terminating parental rights. Everything looked legitimate on the surface, professionally forged by people who had made a business out of stolen children. "We thought we were saving him," Susan Mitchell had sobbed during her interview, her husband's arm around her shoulders. "They told us his parents were drug addicts who had overdosed. They said he'd been in foster care, that he needed stability. We just wanted to give him a good home. We had no idea. We never would have. The investigation would determine what they had known, what they should have known, what level of willful ignorance constituted criminal complicity. But that was for later. Right now, a mother and son were about to meet after 16 years of separation." Chen stood and opened the door. In the hallway, Ryan Mitchell stood with Agent Thornton. He was tall, over 6 feet, with the broad shoulders of someone who worked construction, which Chen knew he did. His sandy brown hair was darker now, cut short, and his face had lost the childish roundness of his school photo. But the eyes were the same, hazel with flecks of gold, and yes, there was still a slight gap between his front teeth. He looked terrified. "Ryan," Chen said softly, "are you ready?" He nodded mutely, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his jacket. Behind him, Chen could see Dave and Susan Mitchell in the waiting area, holding hands, their faces etched with anguish and fear. Chen led Ryan into the conference room. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Linda stood slowly, the photograph falling from her hands to the floor. Her lips moved, forming a name. "Mark." Ryan stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then something flickered in his eyes. Confusion, recognition, pain, and his face crumpled. "Mom?" The word was uncertain, questioning, as if pulled from a place deeper than conscious memory. Linda let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and suddenly they were moving toward each other. She reached up. He was so much taller than she remembered, taller than she had imagined, and touched his face with trembling hands. "My baby," she whispered. "My baby boy. You're alive. You're really alive." Ryan's arms came up awkwardly, uncertainly, then wrapped around her. He was crying now, his shoulders shaking. "I don't remember everything. I don't remember your face, but I remember feeling safe. I remember someone who loved me. Was that you?" "Yes," Linda sobbed against his chest. "That was always me. Always." Chen quietly slipped out of the room, leaving them to their reunion. She leaned against the wall in the hallway, feeling her own tears finally spill over. After 16 years of searching, of dead ends and false hopes, of promises that seemed impossible to keep, they had found him. Mark Sanders was alive. But as the initial joy of the reunion began to settle, the hard questions emerged. Over the following days, as Ryan, he still thought of himself as Ryan, couldn't quite connect to the name Mark, sat through interviews, medical examinations, and psychological evaluations, the pieces of what had happened began to come together. Dr. Patricia Moreno, a psychologist specializing in trauma and memory, worked with Ryan to carefully excavate his buried past. The sessions were exhausting, painful, like archaeological digs through his own mind. "Your memories were suppressed through a combination of trauma and deliberate manipulation," Dr. Moreno explained in one of the joint sessions with Linda present. "When children are abducted and forced into new identities, especially at a young age, their memories can become fragmented. The perpetrators often use a combination of fear, isolation, and repetition to convince the child that their old life wasn't real, that their new identity is who they've always been." "But I was 10, Ryan said, his voice anguished. "How could I forget my own mother, my own life? The human mind has protective mechanism. When reality becomes too painful, too terrifying, sometimes we suppress it rather than face it. You were told your old life was gone. that you could never go back. Your child's brain, trying to survive, eventually accepted that as truth. Through careful therapy and the support of both his biological mother and his adoptive parents, who had been cleared of criminal charges after the investigation determined they had genuinely been deceived by the adoption agency, Ryan began to recover fragments of his past. He remembered the house on Maple Avenue, though the details were hazy. He remembered playing basketball in the driveway with his father. He remembered his mother making pancakes on Saturday mornings, always in the shape of animals. He remembered the school bus he was supposed to catch that October morning. And slowly, painfully, he began to remember the man who had taken him. "There was someone who did work at our house," Ryan said during one session. "Chen and FBI agent Morrison present to document everything. I remember him coming by a few times. He was fixing something, a light maybe? He was friendly. He joked around with me, asked about school, about basketball. He felt safe." "Can you describe him?" Chen asked carefully. "Older than my dad, maybe 40-something. He had dark hair, a beard. He drove a blue car. I remember because he said it was the same color as my favorite team, the Cubs." Ryan's face contorted with the effort of remembering. "He told me that morning that my mom had asked him to drive me to school, that she had to leave early for work and couldn't wait for the bus. It seemed normal. I trusted him." Chen felt her blood run cold. She pulled out a photograph, Thomas Wayne Brennan's mugshot from his 2013 arrest in Kansas City. "Is this the man?" Ryan stared at the photograph for a long moment. I think so. The beard is different, but the eyes. Yes, I think that's him." Finally, they had their identification. Thomas Wayne Brennan had taken Mark Sanders, the handyman who had worked in the neighborhood, who had established trust, who had waited for the perfect moment to strike. But Brennan had died in 2016, killed in a construction accident in Missouri. He would never face justice for what he had done. The answers died with him. Why he had targeted Mark, what he had planned to do with him, how he had connected with the illegal adoption agency that had sold Mark to the Mitchells. Chen tracked down what she could of Brennan's history. He had been involved with New Horizons Family Services as a procurer, one of several people who kidnapped or acquired children through various means and delivered them to the agency, which then falsified documents and sold them to desperate couples willing to pay premium prices and not ask too many questions. Brennan had taken Mark to a house in Iowa, kept him there for months while breaking down his identity, telling him his mother was dead, that his old life was gone, that he was Ryan Mitchell now. Then, when Mark had been sufficiently traumatized and confused, Brennan had delivered him to the agency, collected his payment, and moved on to his next victim. The realization that there had been other victims led to a broader FBI investigation. Over the next months, agents worked to identify other children who might have been trafficked through New Horizons Family Services. Some were found, now adults living under false identities, their real families having long since given them up for dead. Others remained lost, their cases still unsolved, their families still waiting. Linda Sanders threw herself into helping these other families, working with Chen and the FBI to provide support, to share her story, to offer hope. She and Ryan, he had decided to keep the name, as trying to reclaim Mark felt like putting on clothes that no longer fit. Worked on rebuilding their relationship. It was difficult. The easy love between a mother and her 10-year-old son couldn't simply be resumed after 16 years. Ryan had lived an entire adolescence without her. He had Dave and Susan Mitchell, who had raised him, who loved him, who were devastated by the revelation that their adoption had been illegal, but who refused to abandon their son. The situation was messy, complicated, full of competing emotions and loyalties. Ryan split his time between Cedar Rapids and Springfield, trying to honor both sets of parents, trying to reconcile the two identities that existed within him. "Some days I wake up and I'm Ryan," he confessed to Chen during one of their regular check-ins. "I'm the guy who grew up in Cedar Rapids, who played football in high school, who works construction with his dad. And some days I'm Mark, this kid who was stolen, who has this whole other history I can barely remember. I don't know how to be both." "Maybe you don't have to choose," Chen suggested. "Maybe you can honor both parts of your story, even though they shouldn't have been split in the first place." In April 2019, 6 months after the DNA match that had broken the case open, Chen organized a press conference. The story had already leaked to the media, a miraculous reunion after 16 years, a cold case solved through genetic genealogy, a family brought back together against impossible odds. Linda and Ryan stood together at the podium, facing cameras and reporters from across the country. Linda had regained some of the weight she had lost over the years, some of the light in her eyes. Ryan stood tall beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "I want to thank Detective Sergeant Sarah Chen," Linda said, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her face. "She never gave up on my son. For 16 years she kept searching, kept believing, kept fighting when everyone else told her to let go. She brought my baby home." Ryan leaned into the microphone. "I also want to acknowledge Dave and Susan Mitchell, my adoptive parents. They were victims too, deceived by people who exploited their desire to have a family. They raised me with love and care, and I'm grateful for that. This situation is complicated, but love isn't a finite resource. I'm learning that I can love multiple parents, that having my biological mother back in my life doesn't erase the family that raised me." After the press conference, Chen found herself standing with Marcus Webb, her old partner, who had come out of retirement to witness the resolution of the case that had haunted them both. "You did it," Marcus said quietly. "You kept your promise." "We did it," Chen corrected. "And it wasn't just us. It was technology. It was timing. It was Ryan's decision to search for his ancestry. It was 1,000 small things aligning in just the right way. But you never stopped looking. That matters." Chen looked through the window at Linda and Ryan standing together in the parking lot talking quietly. 16 years of grief, of searching, of refusing to give up hope, and now, against all odds, they had been given a second chance. It wasn't a perfect ending. Ryan's childhood was still stolen. Those years could never be returned. The trauma he had endured would take years of therapy to process. The relationship he was building with Linda was new, fragile, requiring patience and care from both of them, and there were still unanswered questions, still other families searching for their missing children, still predators out there. But Mark Sanders was alive. After 16 years, he was finally home. Springfield, Illinois, October 2019. The courthouse in downtown Springfield was packed with journalists, advocates, and families who had followed the Sanders case with desperate hope that their own missing children might someday come home. Detective Sergeant Sarah Chen sat in the gallery beside Linda Sanders, both women dressed in somber business attire, their hands clasped together as they waited for the proceedings to begin. This was the moment they had fought for, the formal legal recognition that Ryan Mitchell was, in fact, Mark Sanders. The DNA evidence had been irrefutable from the start, but the legal system required its processes, its paperwork, its official stamps of approval. Judge Patricia Whitmore entered the courtroom, and everyone rose. She was a woman in her late 50s, known for her fairness and her particular concern for children's welfare cases. As she settled into her seat and reviewed the documents before her, Chen felt Linda's grip tighten. Ryan sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, looking uncomfortable in a suit that Linda had insisted on buying him. Behind him in the back row, Dave and Susan Mitchell sat quietly, their presence both necessary and painful. The investigation had cleared them of criminal wrongdoing. They had genuinely believed the adoption was legitimate, but the civil proceedings were complicated, involving the restoration of Mark's legal identity, while somehow honoring the family bonds that had formed during his years as Ryan Mitchell. "This is an extraordinary case," Judge Whitmore began, her voice measured and clear. "The court has reviewed the extensive documentation, DNA evidence, psychological evaluations, and testimony from all parties involved. The genetic evidence conclusively establishes that the individual known as Ryan Mitchell, born October 3, 1993, is in fact Mark Robert Sanders, reported missing on October 14, 2003 from Springfield, Illinois." Linda let out a small sound, relief and vindication mixed together. Chen squeezed her hand. "The court recognizes the complexity of this situation," the judge continued. "Mr. Sanders spent his formative years, from age 10 to 26, living under a false identity, raised by individuals who believed they were participating in a legitimate adoption. The psychological impact of this cannot be understated. However, the law is clear regarding identity theft and fraudulent documentation, even when the victim is a child too young to consent to the deception." Judge Whitmore looked directly at Ryan. "Mr. Sanders, you have petitioned the court for the legal restoration of your birth name and identity, while also seeking recognition of the familial relationships that developed during your years as Ryan Mitchell. The court hereby grants your petition. Your legal name is restored to Mark Robert Sanders. Your original birth certificate will be unsealed and reinstated. All fraudulent documentation will be nullified." Ryan, Mark, nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Chen knew from their many conversations that he still struggled with his dual identity, still woke up some mornings unsure which name felt right. However, the judge added, the court also recognizes that David and Susan Mitchell acted in good faith and have served as your de facto parents for 15 years. While they have no legal claim to custody, you are now an adult. The court acknowledges that family bonds are not solely defined by biology or legal documents. The relationships you choose to maintain are your own decision. After the hearing, Chen stood on the courthouse steps with Linda and Mark, watching as reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. Mark had become more comfortable with the media attention over the months, though he still preferred to let his mother speak for both of them. This is a victory not just for Mark and our family, Linda said into the microphones, but for every family still searching for their missing children. Genetic genealogy gave us the miracle we prayed for, but it also revealed how many children have been stolen and sold through illegal adoption schemes. We can't stop fighting until every one of them is found and brought home. Chen had learned that Linda's suffering had transformed into purpose. She had become an advocate for missing children, working with legislators to strengthen laws around adoption oversight, lobbying for increased funding for DNA databases, speaking at conferences about the power of genetic genealogy in solving cold cases. That evening, Chen met Mark at a quiet coffee shop near the university. He had enrolled in online courses, working toward the degree he had never pursued when he was Ryan Mitchell, the construction worker. Now, as Mark Sanders, he was exploring who he might have become if his life hadn't been stolen. "How are you really doing?" Chen asked, studying his face across the table. Mark stirred his coffee absently. "I keep having these dreams. I'm 10 years old again, standing at that corner and the blue car pulls up. But in the dreams, I run. I don't get in. I go home to my mom and my dad, and everything is okay. And then I wake up, and I'm 26, and 16 years are just gone." "You're getting help for the trauma?" "Yeah. Dr. Moreno is great. She says it'll take time, that some days will be harder than others. She says I need to forgive myself for being a trusting kid, for getting in that car." He looked up at Chen, his eyes haunted. "But how do I forgive myself when my mother lost 16 years because of that choice?" "Mark, you were 10 years old, a child. What happened to you was not your fault. It was Brennan's fault. It was the fault of the people who ran that adoption agency, but not yours. Never yours." Mark nodded, though Chen could see he didn't fully believe it yet. Healing would take time, maybe years, maybe forever. Some wounds never completely closed. "I went to the house on Maple Avenue yesterday," Mark said quietly. "Mom still lives there, you know, in the same house I disappeared from. She never left, because she wanted me to be able to find my way home if I ever could." Did it feel familiar? Some things did. The driveway where I played basketball, I stood there and I could almost see myself, this little kid shooting hoops pretending to be Michael Jordan. The kitchen where Mom made those animal pancakes. My bedroom, which she kept exactly the same for years, like a time capsule. He paused, his voice thick, but it also felt like someone else's life. Like I was visiting a museum of a person who doesn't exist anymore. "He does exist," Chen said gently. "He exists in you, alongside Ryan. You're both people, and you get to decide how they fit together." 3 months later, in January 2020, Chen received a call that brought the Sanders case full circle. FBI agent Morrison had been following up on other potential victims of the New Horizons Family Services trafficking operation. A woman in Minnesota had submitted DNA to a genealogy database and matched with a family whose daughter had disappeared from Wisconsin in 2001. "We're reopening 12 cases connected to that agency," Morrison told Chen. "Your work on the Sanders case broke this whole thing open. We're going to find more kids, Sarah. We're going to bring more families back together." Chen felt a wave of emotion, pride, hope, vindication for all those years of refusing to give up. Linda Sanders should know she'll want to help those families. Already called her. She's organizing a support network, connecting families of recovered children with resources, counseling, legal assistance. She's turning her tragedy into something that helps others. On a cold February morning, Chen drove to the cemetery where Thomas Wayne Brennan was buried. It was a small, poorly maintained place on the outskirts of Kansas City. His grave marked only by a simple flat stone with his name and dates. No epitaph, no flowers, no indication that anyone mourned him. Chen stood over the grave, hands in her pockets, looking down at the man who had caused so much suffering. Part of her was furious that he had died before facing justice, before being held accountable for destroying Mark's childhood. for the years of anguish he had inflicted on Linda Sanders. But another part of her felt only a cold, empty satisfaction. He was gone. His victims were being found, freed from the false identities he and his accomplices had forced upon them. His legacy was being dismantled, piece by piece. "We won," Chen said quietly to the grave. "You thought you could erase Mark Sanders, but we found him. We brought him home and we're finding the others too. Everything you did, all the children you stole, it's coming undone. You failed." The wind picked up, scattering dead leaves across the grave. Chen turned and walked back to her car, leaving Brennan's burial place behind without looking back. Mark Sanders was home. After 16 years, countless dead ends and a miracle born from genetic science, the impossible had happened. It wasn't the ending anyone would have chosen. Too much had been lost, too much time stolen. But it was an ending nonetheless. And for Linda Sanders, for Sarah Chen, for everyone who had refused to give up hope, it was enough.